There's a chapter at the end of Proverbs that most men read past without stopping. It is addressed to a king. It is delivered by a mother. And buried inside it is one of the most detailed portraits of financial stewardship in the entire Hebrew Bible. That portrait is not of a warrior. It is not of a priest. It is a portrait of a man who fears God and handles money in a way that produces real, generational, lasting wealth. And here is what most people miss entirely. The Proverbs 31 passage is not only about a woman. It begins with a mother's instruction to her son, King Lemuel, a man she was training for leadership, for responsibility, for the weight of governing other people's lives. That is the blueprint, not a poem about femininity. A mother's warning to a man about what kind of person he needs to become before God can trust him with anything. Habit number 1. He fears the Lord before he touches the money. The chapter closes with this. Proverbs 31:30. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. The Hebrew phrase is Yirat Yahweh, reverence that shapes every decision before the decision is made. And what is true of the woman in verse 30 is the same truth the mother is building toward throughout the entire chapter. Fear is the foundation, not anxiety, not performance, not religious routine. The deep, orienting reverence that puts God first in every financial decision. Before the budget, before the investment, before the purchase. Most men approach money as a problem to be solved with strategy. They read books, they build spreadsheets, they make plans, and they wonder why the blessing is still somewhere out ahead of them. God is not waiting for a better strategy. He is waiting for a surrendered heart. David was a warrior, a poet, a king. But the reason God called him a man after his own heart is not found in any of his military campaigns. It is found in the fact that before David built anything, he said this in Psalm 24:1. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it. He knew the money was not his to manage. It was his to steward. That is where every habit starts. That is the foundation under every other habit in this list. Habit number 2. He works with his whole self, not just his hands. Proverbs 31:13 describes willing hands. The Hebrew word is kefetz. It means delight, not obligation, not mere effort. Joy that moves through the work itself. The man God trusts with wealth is not a man who works because he has to. He is a man whose labor is an act of worship. And here is what makes that distinction important. Willingness is not about energy. It is about alignment. When a man's work lines up with his calling and with the direction God has assigned him, the work carries a different weight entirely. Nehemiah is one of the clearest examples in all of Scripture. He was a cupbearer to a foreign king, not a prophet, not a priest, an ordinary man with an ordinary job. But when the walls of Jerusalem lay broken and the people lived in disgrace, Nehemiah did not wait for someone else to move. He wept, he fasted, he prayed, and then he went to work. Nehemiah 4:6 says, "The people worked with all their heart. The wall was rebuilt in 52 days, not because the workers were especially skilled, because they were entirely committed." God does not search for the most talented man. He looks for the most willing one. And the man who works with his whole heart in the place God assigned him will receive rewards that no amount of natural talent can manufacture on its own. Habit number 3. He plans before he spends. Proverbs 31:16 records this of the woman of valor. She considers a field and buys it. The Hebrew word zamam means to calculate deliberately, to evaluate with precision before committing. She did not buy on impulse. She studied the field first. And the man walking in financial blessing carries this same discipline. He does not make decisions on emotion. He does not spend first and then ask God's blessing second. He seeks wisdom in advance and moves only when clarity arrives. Jesus addresses this directly in Luke 14:28. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? That is not a parable about construction. It is a principle about how God-honoring men make financial decisions. Solomon himself said in Proverbs 21:5 that the plans of the diligent lead to profit, but haste leads to poverty. The contrast is not between faith and fear. It is between intentionality and impulsiveness. The man God blesses has thought carefully before he acts. He is already prepared before the moment arrives. Habit number 4. He builds more than one stream. Look at the portfolio spread across Proverbs 31. A field purchased, a vineyard planted, merchandise produced, goods sold to merchants. That is not one income source. That is a diversified operation. And Ecclesiastes 11:2 makes this principle explicit. Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. That is not greed. That is wisdom, written by the wisest man who ever lived. God himself built redundancy into the creation. Seed and harvest, rain and sun, land and sea. He did not construct a world that depends on a single source for everything. And the man walking in financial wisdom reflects that same design in his own economic life. Boaz, in the book of Ruth, was not simply a farmer. He was a landowner, a businessman, a man of standing in the city gate. Ruth 2:1 calls him a Gibor Chayil, a man of valor. That is the same phrase used in Proverbs 31:10 for the woman of valor. His wealth was not accidental. It was the accumulated result of faithful, diversified stewardship over a long span of time. And because his hands were full, when Ruth came to his field, he had something to give her. A man with only one stream can only give from one stream. A man with a portfolio can give from abundance. Habit number 5. He speaks wisdom that outlives him. Proverbs 31:26 says, "She opens her mouth with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue." The Hebrew word is chokmah, not casual opinion, not advice offered carelessly in a conversation. Wisdom that has been shaped by fear of God, tested by hardship, and given freely to those who need it most. The man who builds lasting financial legacy does not only accumulate wealth, he deposits what he has learned into the next generation. Because wealth without transferred wisdom is wealth waiting to disappear. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children." Not just money, an inheritance. The Hebrew carries the meaning of something passed down through covenant, through relationship, through intentional and deliberate transfer from one generation to the next. The wealth David accumulated in his lifetime was enormous. But the reason the temple was eventually built is not because David had the money. It is because David had the wisdom to spend decades preparing for a project he would never personally complete. He deposited plans, materials, instructions, and vision into Solomon before he died. And Solomon built on that foundation. Your financial breakthrough may not be for you alone. It may be the foundation of something the generation behind you is already waiting to build on. The man who understands this does not hold his wisdom tightly. He opens his mouth. He teaches. He gives it away before he is gone. True wealth is not measured by how much we accumulate, but by how faithfully we honor God with what He has placed in our hands. If you want to transform your finances into a tool for generational blessing, start walking according to this divine blueprint today. If this message spoke to your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming teachings of the Proverbs 31 project for the man of God.